Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and joining me today on the line, we have a special guest. He will be fighting in the main event of UFC Fight Night 89 against Rory MacDonald. He is the Wonder Boy, Stephen Thompson. And Stephen, thanks for coming on Beyond the Cage.
Anytime, my friend. Glad to be on with you, my friend.
All right, I wanted to start off the bat asking you this. The UFC is having their first ever fight in South Dakota coming up next month, and I was wondering, how long do you think it will be until you see the first ever UFC fight in your home state of South Carolina?
Oh, man, I hope pretty soon. I know if they actually come to South Carolina, we would pack that place out. A lot of UFC fans, and it's growing every day.
Now, for this event, much like they had for the last event, UFC 199, early weigh-ins will be something that you will be allowed to do at the hotel a couple hours before the actual weigh-in event. Does that excite you to be able to weigh in officially a couple hours before you usually do, Stephen?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the more, the faster the weigh-ins, the more we can rehydrate, get ready for the fight. And I think doing it this way will actually make the fights more exciting. People aren't, dehydrated. They're not drained. A lot of times when you're having to wait, to rehydrate all day long, not having any fuel in your system, it can, really wear you out. So I think it's going to be better, and people are going to see more exciting fights with the new rules.
Now, speaking of some new rules, the UFC also starting in about a month with the events around UFC 200 will start a new rule where you have to show up to fight week within 8% of the fight contracted weight for that whatever weight class you signed up for. And do you like that new rule starting forward with the 8%, Stephen, or do you think that may affect you a lot?
No, you know what? I'm actually walking around about 8% of what my weigh-in weight will be. I'm walking around about 184, 185, and I actually started doing that before my last fight with Johnny Hendricks with the new USADA rules where you couldn't do any IVs, so I wasn't really sure how my body would cope with that, so I made a decision to actually walk around a lot of weight. Now, I'm pretty much, I can eat whatever I want, and I'll still stay around 185. That's just where I'm at. I feel just as strong as I was when I was 195, but I feel so much faster. So I like the new rules, to be honest with you.
Now, of course, in addition to training in your home there in South Carolina, you also, on occasion, have gone up to New York to visit the team there, Sarah Longo, Chris Weidman, Aljamain Sterling, Al Iaquinta, Gian Vellante, just to name a few names. And what do you take away from those training sessions up there in New York with those gentlemen?
You know what? Most of my training sessions is actually with Chris. So when it comes to sparring and doing the mid stuff, I have Ray Longo's and Chris Weidman's gym. Man, it's phenomenal. I learned so much from them, and having Chris Weidman in on your legs trying to take you down, it makes the 170 seem a whole lot easier. Of course, I've done some rolling with Gian Vellante and Aljamain at Matt Serra's, getting some jiu-jitsu in. The jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. So I love it, man. I love going back up there. It's like a home away from home.
Now, of course, in this fight here against Rory MacDonald, even though he trains in Montreal and is originally from British Columbia, he's still kind of the hometown guy, being from Canada, fighting in Ottawa. And do you like being the bad guy, Stephen, and kind of going in there, or is that a weird role for you?
Not at all. I think everybody understands that, me and Rory actually know each other. We've been friends for, a long time. But we understand at the top of the game that we're going to have to face each other. So, we're going to be friends before and friends after. I've fought in many people's backyards before. So, I'm ready for it mentally.
In preparation for his fight against you, it was announced that Rory MacDonald brought in Bellator welterweight fighter Michael Page to kind of emulate you. And do you think that will help him in his fight, or do you think there's no one out there that can copy your style?
It is. I mean, I understand that he's being a Michael Page Venom. He's bringing in Raymond Daniels just to get used to my style, because my style is very hard to get used to, especially when you're out there actually facing somebody in the octagon. The movement's different, but it's smart that he's bringing these guys in to kind of simulate it. But it's still a little different than what he's going to be seeing out there Saturday night. So you can prepare pretty much all you want. It's still going to be a little bit different.
Now, of course, this will be Rory's first fight since his loss to Robbie Lawler for the title last year at UFC 189. And with the damage that he sustained from that fight, do you expect to see the same Rory MacDonald that we saw during and before that fight in your bout, Stephen?
I didn't become the fighter I am if it wasn't for my loss against Matt Brown. So I'm expecting him to be the best Rory MacDonald after his last loss. Yeah, he did take a lot of damage, but he's had a lot of time off to recoup and recover. So that's how I got to look at it mentally. So that way I'm ready whenever I step out there, knowing that I've got the best Rory in the octagon with me right now. So if there's any, if I'm thinking he's not going to be the same, but he is different, it can kind of mess with you a little bit mentally when you're out there. So I gotta, just make sure that, I'm ready for the best Rory.
Now, your last two fights were also scheduled for the main event, and you made short work of your opponents, finishing both of them in the first round. So once again, in the main event, do you expect it to go quickly, or do you think this one might go a little bit longer than one round?
I always prepare for a 5-minute round war. That's just what I've always done. That way I'm training as hard as I can and ready for the worst, Sometimes it doesn't end up that way. Like my last fight against Johnny Hendricks, it ended in the first round, and same thing with Ellenberger. So I'm just going to go out there and do what I do. If I knock him out, I knock him out. If it doesn't, I don't. I'm just going to go out there and have some fun, man.
Now, against Rory, obviously a very technical striker, a bigger and taller welterweight like yourself. What are you expecting from him come Saturday night at the TD Arena?
Oh, man. Well, you know what? I expect him. That's the thing about Rory. He's very well-rounded, and he's not afraid to actually go out there and stand up. But I know eventually he's going to want to get me down to the ground. So I'm expecting that. So I've got to prepare for that shot, for that takedown, to keep the fight standing where I want it and feel most comfortable, which is on my feet.
Now, of course, I wanted to get your thoughts on the co-main event of the evening. Of course, you're familiar with one of the gentlemen fighting in Patrick Cote as he takes on Donald Cerrone. What do you think about that matchup also in your division, the welterweight division?
Man, I think that's another exciting fight. Donald Cerrone is known for having exciting fights, great striking, good jiu-jitsu, and same with Cote. These guys always bring it. So, it's going to be fireworks, my friend. The whole night's we have a great card, and that's just another fight for everybody to be looking out for.
Do you believe that if you get past Rory MacDonald to add your 7th consecutive victory, do you believe that will be enough for a UFC title shot?
I don't like looking past anybody, but with a win over Rory MacDonald, definitely. The UFC has to give it to me. After this, yeah, if I go out there and I defeat Rory, I'm demanding a title shot, baby.
Well, speaking of the title picture in your division, the welterweight division, they already have the next title match set as Tyron Woodley will be taking on Robbie Lawler at UFC 201 at the end of July in Atlanta. And how do you think that matchup's going to play out, Stephen?
It's a very tough fight for both of these guys, but I think Lawler's got it. He's coming off 2 really good wins over Rory and Carlos Condit. It's been a while since Tyrone's fought, so he may see a little bit of cage rust out there, and we'll just got to see what kind of Tyron Woodley comes in. He's notorious for, not be able to go all 5 rounds and start slowing down later on in the rounds, and that's when Robbie Lawler actually starts picking the pace up in those later rounds. So I got my money on Lawler.
Now, of course, you said that you're looking forward to a possible title shot with this win. Do you think Carlos Condit is still in the picture as well? Do you think that may throw a wrench in any thoughts or plans that you had?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think so. He fought for the title, early on this year. So they may give it to somebody else, even though it was a close one. But you still wouldn't want to rule it out because, you know, he's one of the best welterweights in the division. So yeah, man. I mean, we could possibly be fighting, and but you know what? I think after this, they should give me the title shot after this fight. So maybe after that, there's no telling, man. There's no telling who you'll be fighting next.
All right, Stephen, I'll get you out of here with this. Of course, about a week or two ago, they announced the new Ninja Turtles movie coming out to theaters and whatnot. So I was wondering, who is your favorite Ninja Turtle?
My favorite Ninja Turtle is definitely Leonardo with the two swords, man. He's the leader, and he's the one that all the brothers look up to. So, you know, I've got two brothers of mine and two sisters as well. And, yeah, man, he's always been my favorite.
All right, he is the Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at WonderBoyMMA. And Stephen, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I look forward to your fight against Rory MacDonald on June 18th.
Thanks, my friend. Definitely a pleasure.
Once again, that was the Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson right here on Beyond the Cage. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. On today's show, I'm going to discuss a few MMA headlines. Then I'm going to preview Bellator 156 and World Series of Fighting 31, which take place the same day, Friday, June 17th. And then I will end the show by previewing and then picking the 5 main card fights for UFC Fight Night 89 this Saturday, June 18th. Once again, as I mentioned, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And as you just heard, speaking of UFC Ottawa, you just heard my interview with UFC main event fighter for UFC Ottawa, Stephen the Wonder Boy Thompson, about his main event fight in the welterweight division against former title challenger Rory MacDonald. So again, thanks to Stephen for coming on the show, and I really look forward to breaking down that fight later on in the program. Once again, I am going solo, so with that in mind, a couple of shout-outs to pass along. Facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast, the official Facebook page for the show, Beyond the Cage. And if you haven't liked it already, please do. We are still on the quest for 500 likes. Once we hit that amount, we will be giving away a plethora of signed photos from various MMA stars. So head over to the Facebook page, again, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. And of course, you're watching the show right here on YouTube, so if you haven't already, please subscribe, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast to get alerted on all the new videos coming to the channel. And I mentioned already, my Twitter handle is at Jim Graham, just my name, JimGramm. Getting to some headlines real quickly. Wasn't that much in the news this week in the world of mixed martial arts, especially compared to last week with Ariel Helwani and UFC 199 storylines with that and Brock Lesnar returning and all that good stuff. But one of the things I wanted to get to now, the WWE, which of course Brock Lesnar was with, then went to the UFC and went back to afterwards. There's been talks that with the WWE, quote-unquote, letting him fight or leasing him, so to speak, like a soccer term, like a transfer or something, that the WWE expects something in return. Now, of course, at last year's WrestleMania, there was an appearance by former UFC champion Ronda Rousey. So you could think, okay, maybe that's the agreement, but the UFC is either talking about another appearance for Ronda or possibly she just was runner-up on this season of Dancing with the Stars in Paige Van Zandt. Now, of course, the next WrestleMania won't be for another 9 months. Of course, it's closer to the one they just had in March than it will be for next year, so I don't know if they would want a sooner appearance for a UFC star. And while that's good in terms of cross-promoting and stuff, and WWE has a nice fan base and everything, it could be construed the wrong way by some. And I got kind of this idea from SheerDog.com in their mailbag article for this week. And he was kind of mentioning, I believe this was Jeff Shearwood himself, mentioning that too much exposure or crossover could lead to people believing the UFC is scripted, just like the WWE. And while, again, some people may think that, anyone that actually looks into it and sees what's going on between these two companies, the UFC and WWE, I think would quickly realize what's real and what's scripted. So I don't think it's that big of an issue. I really don't. But it's something to consider. But if it's going to be once a year or once every couple of years that a UFC star does an event with the WWE, I'm not too worried about it. Because, again, none happened this year. It happened last year's WrestleMania, so that'd be 2015's WrestleMania. So it's already over a year since Ronda Rousey appeared. So I really don't hold that much stock into it. But I think it's good for a UFC star, whether it's Paige Van Zandt or anyone else, to come over and do some sort of cameo type little in-ring appearance. I think is a good thing for the company. Getting to Bellator 156, finally we get to see Marcus Galvão against Eduardo Dantas for the second time. Of course, this was supposed to happen earlier. Actually, this fight was supposed to happen twice, basically, already. And both times, one another has gotten injured, once being Dantas and the other being Galvão. Finally, we get to see the rematch between these two for the ultimate prize, the Bellator Bantamweight Championship. These two first fought back in February of 2013, with Dantas winning by second round knockout. And since that standpoint, Galvão has looked really good, winning 4 straight fights, 3 of them by finish, beating really the best person along the way. Of course, Joe Warren at Bellator 135. That was now over a year ago. So Galvão has not defended his title. He's been out for a while. He's had injury problems. He's already lost to Dantas once, who is the younger guy and the bigger guy, and I think is looking to prove something. Of course, he is the former Bellator Bantamweight champion, and he defended it successfully against Galvão and Leone. He lost it to Joe Warren not quite 2 years ago, about 18 months ago. He came back and beat the very tough Mike Richman in May of last year. Again, because of injuries, that was his last fight. And of course, we know Richman was proven after that fight to be taking performance-enhancing drugs, which you may even think is even maybe more spectacular the way he dominated Mike Richman. So I think this is a huge fight. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think the difference, again, much like their first matchup, that size that Dantas brings to this division at 5'10" is a very hard thing to replicate. He's very long for this division, and it's hard to bring another guy into a training camp like that. Now, these two hope to be friends, and they've kind of trained with each other before, and I don't see that being an issue in terms of bringing the fight. I think both are hungry to prove themselves, even though Galvão is the champion, again, hasn't defended it. Dantas is hungry because, the way he lost his title in that very close fight to Joe Warren, he really wants that title back. And I think we're going to see an entertaining fight. The only thing that could deter is because both guys have had a long layoff. I wonder if there's any rust for these guys. I know they're, like I said, Galvão is the older guy, but let's not make him like he's an old man. I mean, he's only 33, 6 years older than Dantas at 27. So they're not like super old or anything, but anytime you take over a year off in your job, there's going to be, I think, an adjustment. I think there's going to be a feeling out process. And this being a 5-round fight, if both guys are off their game, this could drag on. So I think there is a slight chance it could be boring, but I think Dantas I would, again, favor in the rematch. And that's not to say Galvão doesn't have any chance of winning. I think one of the things that made him successful first time, again, that size and reach, and I just think overall better finishing ability than Galvão, I think, is a huge thing. And also the fact that I think Dantas has the better conditioning. I think if this thing goes into the championship rounds, I would favor Dantas. I mean, if you look at his record, sure, it doesn't seem like, oh, this guy's a cardio machine or anything like that. He's only been to the 5th round once in his career, but he did so against Joe Warren, and to me he looked good those whole 5 rounds against Joe, who we know is a tough grinder. So I feel like he can handle it. And again, I'm just super stoked we finally get to see this fight. I think this would have been a better fight to try to put on the card in May with King Mo, especially how things worked out with that card kind of falling apart with King Mo against Phil Davis. Or I think this would have been good saved for Dynamite, or possibly like the card after, to kind of build up and use the proposed success that Dynamite should bring Bellator and kind of maybe try to ride off that wave. So while I'm glad this fight's happening, I think they could have placed it a little bit better. Anyways, looking over the rest of the card, some decent fights. Former Bellator middleweight champion Brandon Halsey returns to take on John Salter. Should be interesting to see how he returns to the fray, considering the problems he's had with weight cutting and performance-enhancing drugs. I believe there was a problem with, so that should be interesting. Also, Chidi Njokuani, he was supposed to take on Douglas Lima. He's now taking on replacement Thiago Yambo Goncalves, if I said that, Goncalves, and that is his replacement on short notice, about, I think, 2-3 weeks for Goncalves. So that should be interesting because Njokuani is a very long and lanky and dangerous striker. So that should be a very interesting matchup. Also, Chris Honeycutt against Mikel Parlo, I think, also has a chance to be a good fight, and that should be on the main card as well. That's about it as far as notable names. I think this is a solid kind of middle-of-the-road card. I think actually this is a better card than the King Mo card. I even think a better card than the one in Boise that they had. Of course, just on paper, not in terms of what actually happened. Of course, you expect the middleweight title fight there between Carvalho and Manhope to be great. It didn't turn out that way, but on paper it looked like a better card. But I think this one will be solid, even with the loss of Douglas Lima. Of course, Douglas Lima will now be fighting Paul Daly in the main event of Bellator's first trip there to England. So still a good fight, and I'm actually kind of glad. No offense to Njokuani, but I'm kind of glad he's taking on Paul Daly. World Series of Fighting 31 will also take the same place, different side of the country. Of course, the Bellator fight will be taking place in Fresno, this at the Foxwood Resort in Connecticut for World Series of Fighting 31. Main event will be their heavyweight championship, as Blagi Anilov, former also Maximum Fighting star, will take on Josh Copeland. Jason High and Mike Ricci, two former UFC products, will battle each other. Speaking of former UFC fighters, John Howard will take on Thiago Meller, and former World Series of Fighting title challenger Luis Palomino will take on Shayman Da Silva Moraes, and that should round out the main card here. Honestly, if you don't have access to DVR, or you really only like watching fights live, this is actually, for World Series of Fighting, a pretty good card. But compared to the Bellator card, I'm more excited for that. Now, I think the main events are comparable because Ivanov has looked really good so far since moving over to World Series of Fighting. He's a good finisher, good knockouts, constantly moving forward and throwing heavy, so he's an exciting guy. I think his fight should be good, but Jason High and Mike Ricci I'm not super excited for. John Howard's hit or miss sometimes with being exciting. I mean, he has a lot of power, but it doesn't always come through. Now, at least Palomino, that dude, I don't know if he's capable of having a boring fight. So I don't know a lot about Moraes, his opponent, Shayman Moraes, but Luis Palomino is going to make that fight exciting. So that could end up being the fight of the weekend just because of Luis Palomino. But for World Series of Fighting, again, I wish whoever, I know Ray Seffel's in charge, but I think there may be some other powers that be. They got to talk to Scott Coker and the people at Viacom and Spike Sports, because I think combining would just be a very smart idea for both these companies. World Series of Fighting, I mean, yeah, they've had 31 events, which is awfully impressive because they've had some good talent come through, don't get me wrong, but the mark of a company in this day and age, if you're trying to compete at the big time, is you have to develop young talent. And with the exception of Justin Gaethje, that's really the only fighter that World Series of Fighting has developed. That's the only claim. Bellator has developed several fighters. Now, of course, because of contracts and whatnot, they haven't always found their way to the UFC. We look at somebody like a Ben Askren or something. But they have developed fighters, and a lot of them are still under their banner, that you feel like could compete with the UFC, that legitimately are some of the best fighters in the world. And really, for World Series of Fighting, with the exception of the aforementioned Justin Gaethje, you don't feel that way. And I think that is why they're not looked at very fondly, to be honest, and why their events don't draw, because they're already kind of getting defeated before you even turn on the channel. And again, I watch it because I'm talking right here on this very YouTube channel about the fight, so I'm going to watch it, but I'm not as excited for it. I don't get hyped for too many World Series of Fighting fights, and hopefully this one can maybe prove me wrong, but we'll see. I think if you have to make a choice Friday night, I'd stick to Bellator. Before I get to my coverage here of UFC Fight Night 89 from Ottawa, I want to give a shout out to some of our partners. AJ Hiller at MMASignaturesUSA.com. Of course, the #1 source in the world for MMA memorabilia. So go on there, check out what he's got, and he ships to over 30 countries. That's MMASignaturesUSA.com. Of course, the great Facebook blog and our friends at MMAFightClub.net, also online. And again, the Facebook blog is where they started, Facebook.com/MMAFightClub. Like the page, check the website, and join the discussion again at Facebook.com/MMAFightClub. Getting to UFC Fight Night 89, 5 fights will be shown on the main card at Fox Sports 1 on Saturday night for the arena at TD Place. And before we get to that 5-fight main card, looking over the undercard, pretty solid undercard here, as Randa Marcos, friend of the show, will take on Jocelyn Jones-Larberger in the women's strawweight division. Also another friend of the show, Sam Alvey, will take on former Ultimate Fighter winner Elias Theodorou in the middleweight division. Joe Soto, who actually is a former UFC title challenger, he's taking on Chris Beal. Ali Bagatina, former flyweight title challenger, taking on Gene Hajeda, I believe I said that correctly. Also, the Barn Cat, Tamden McCrory, makes his return here after a successful debut against Josh Sam. He's taking on Krzysztof Jacko. And to round out the main card, or the undercard, Leandro Silva will take on Jason Saga. So pretty solid undercard, which will be part of the UFC Fight Pass streaming network, as well as the undercard being shown on Fox Sports 2 leading up to this 5-fight main card, which kicks off with a women's fight. And the reason this is significant is because it's the first ever UFC women's fight at 125 pounds, as former 115 title challenger Valerie Letourneau takes on Joanne Calderwood. Now, Letourneau's no stranger to fighting higher than strawweight, as she has actually fought at 135 pounds in her career, and Calderwood has actually competed previously in Invicta at 125 pounds as well. So both are no strangers to this division, and I don't know how this will shake out. I think this is kind of like a test for the flyweight division. I don't think it's just simply a one-off fight, and the UFC will never revisit 125 pounds. So I think a lot of pressure is on these ladies, because I think if it's kind of a boring fight, maybe they dismiss the idea of having a division in between strawweight and bantamweight. But I think if these two girls go in there and have a good fight, I think that may lead the UFC to thinking maybe we should have a division in between. Now, somebody like Jessica Andrade, who just fought, who moved from bantamweight in her last fight to strawweight, yeah, that can happen, but not as likely. That's gonna happen. That's not gonna happen too many times. That's a 20-pound jump. That's a huge leap, and I think having a division in the middle is a good thing, because you're gonna get some girls that are too small for 125, or too small for 135 rather, that can move down, and some girls that are, again, struggling to make weight, that are kind of too big for 115 to get into the UFC. And I think the 125 is going to be a very nice division. There's a lot of girls outside the UFC who are very good in this weight class. So I think it's a big deal, and I think it will happen eventually. But I think some things do pin on this fight being entertaining. Now, actually, getting all the speculation, all that jazz out of the way, this fight should be a good one. You have Valerie Letourneau, who should be a little bigger and size-wise, and a little stronger than Calderwood. And Calderwood's still, I think, going to be a little taller here and a little lankier, regardless of which weight class this would happen, as Calderwood's listed at 5'6", and you have Letourneau's listed at 5'7". But Calderwood's known for fighting long, and one key for Calderwood winning is, again, she likes kind of having the fight at a nice pace where she can strike at the outside, kind of come in and come out and avoid getting shots. But the way to beat her, and it's been shown a couple times, Rose Namajunas, even Marina Moroz, you got to get in her face. You got to be coming for it. You can't sit back and wait for Calderwood to come to you, and you can't sit back and try to counter against Calderwood. I think that's been proven. Now, she has been submitted once, and Courtney Casey, her last fight, Calderwood won and competed in, also did okay in the submission game early on, before Calderwood lied her down. But Letourneau has to come forward, has to keep the pressure on. She can't sit back. And for Calderwood, because I think she's figured out that's what girls are going to do to her to try to beat her, and she kind of countered that a little bit against Courtney Casey. Now, while Courtney Casey is a good fighter, I don't think she's at the level yet of Valerie Letourneau. Now, Calderwood, again, I'd love to see that Calderwood we saw against Casey, throwing that output, going for it, throwing the punches and bunches and going for the finish, and kind of getting back and throwing that aggressive nature the opponents have been using against her and putting them right back at their opponents. And that's the Joanne Calderwood I want to see come out. I really do, because I think Letourneau is a dangerous opponent, and I think because she's used to fighting, bigger girls, I think she has some surprising power, and I think that's power you don't want to let linger on. And I think because of her overall striking ability, really, I really don't think Calderwood can win sitting back like her normal strategy. I think she has to try to change. I don't think she can fight at that pace anymore, especially against top girls like Letourneau. Next fight of the evening in the 155 division, as Olivia Aubin-Mercier will take on Thibault Gouti, if I pronounce that correctly. Looking at Olivier, he is coming into this fight 3-2, lost his first fight in a while, had snapped a 3-fight winning streak that the French-Canadian had, as he lost to Carlos Diego Ferreira at Fox 18. 6 of the 7 career victories are by submission. Looking at Gouti, he is 0-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut in his first ever fight in his career. He's now 11-1 to Timo Pacquiao, if I said that correctly, at Fight Night 84. 6 of 11 career victories are by submission. Don't know much about Gouti. I know he lost his last fight. Saw that was his first loss in his career. He's now going to be on the main card against a better opponent in Aubin-Mercier. And I don't know, when you go undefeated, it wasn't like a super long stretch, but you go 11-0, you're beating guys, you're finishing guys, as he has 9 of his 11 career victories by finish, and hasn't had a decision win since 2014, and he had to lost your first fight of your career, and he lost in 24 seconds in the very first round getting submitted. That can be kind of a psychological thing there, to lose, not only lose your first fight, but lose the way you did so quickly like that, and he lost by submission. If there's one thing Olivia can do, that's submit people. And in fact, the rear naked choke is his submission of choice. Of those 6 submission victories that I just mentioned, I believe, let's see, all of them but one are rear naked choke. The other one was an inverted triangle Kimura in his first ever UFC win back in October 2014 against Jake Lindsay. So this is a guy that can grapple. And that, I think, will spell bad things for the man actually from France there in Gouti. Now, maybe he'll surprise me, and he'll avoid the takedown, and maybe he'll outstrike Aubin-Mercier, but I think there's a lot of things going against the Frenchman in this fight, and I like the French-Canadian a lot more. Next fight of the evening, Steve Bosse against Sean O'Connell. Sean O'Connell will be moving down from the light heavyweight division to take on the middleweight here, Steve Bosse. O'Connell 2-3, probably the reason for the change here in the division. His last fight, he got knocked out by Ilir Latifi at Fight Night 81 in just like 30 seconds. That's another reason. But he does have some power, 9-17 wins by knockout as well. But is enough as Steve Bosse, man. He showed he had some incredible power, knocking out James Tijuana his last fight at UFC Fight Night 85, and 9 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. This is going to be a fun one. I think this is just two dudes just slugging at each other. Much like Bossie's last fight there against Tijuana, it's really who lands first. O'Connell should be better suited for this weight class than fighting some of those big monsters there at light heavyweight, and that could pose a problem for what, again, is proposed to possibly be a little smaller guy in Steve Bossy, but the power Bossy has is definitely legitimate, and I think it's going to be a fun fight. I don't think it's going to be very technical, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of these guys that wins walks away with a first-round knockout and possibly the knockout of the night bonus. Co-main event of the evening in the welterweight division as the Cowboy Donald Cerrone takes on Patrick Cote. If you want to know how impressive, how many fights Donald Cerrone has, now, he joined the UFC, I believe, in 2007-2008. Patrick Cote's first ever UFC fight was in 2004. However, Cote only has, let's see, he has 23 total fights. Cerrone has 20. So in about 3 less years, I know Patrick Cote's been back and forth with other organizations, but still, if you look at the total body of time, 12 years Cote's been in the UFC. Have about 9 years, 8-9 years here for Donald Cerrone. Almost has a mini fight, just crazy. Anyways, Cote 15-8 in the UFC. Since moving to welterweight, he's looked really good. Currently riding a 3-fight winning streak. His last fight, he defeated Ben Saunders at Fight Night 81, and 10 of his career victories, 10 of his 23 career victories, I should say, are by knockout. Looking at the Cowboy, as I mentioned, 20 fights in the UFC, 16-4. His first ever UFC fight at 170 pounds, he defeated the Brazilian Cowboy Alex Oliveira at Fight Night 83, and 16 of his 29 career victories are by submission. Now, unlike his last fight, he's not just taking another 55-er, not cutting 15 pounds in Alex Oliveira. And he's also taking a guy that's much more experienced, and to me is just a better quality opponent. No offense to the Brazilian Cowboy, I think still has a lot to learn and is a good fighter in his own right now, but to me he's not Patrick Cote. Patrick Cote has legitimate power, a legitimate chin, solid grappler, good top game, I think has improved his wrestling over the years, and is a guy that comes at you. He definitely moves forward. And for Donald Cerrone, a guy that is not a big knockout guy, even at 155 pounds, only had 5 knockouts in his career, moving up, again, your power is not going to be as effective. Now, he should be the faster guy than Patrick Cote, but I really wonder in this fight how Cerrone deals with the size of Cote. Now, I'm sure Donald Cerrone there at Jackson's and Winklejohn's gym, and of course his own ranch that he kind of does stuff with, I'm sure he's trained with a lot of the bigger guys there before. But training and actually getting in the ring with one are 2 different things. Or octagon, I should say. Patrick Cote has fought as high as 205 pounds, and he did so against Tito Ortiz. And it was a close fight. That's when Tito was still relevant in the world of mixed martial arts. So that says something to me. Now, I know that was 12 years ago that he fought Tito Ortiz, but this dude is a big, strong dude. And I think for Cerrone, he has to try to be on his feet and moving around, staying at the outside, and use those leg kicks. He can certainly not get in the pocket with Patrick Cote, and he can't get in too many big exchanges with Patrick Cote. And grappling-wise, Cerrone's definitely better at submissions, but I wouldn't want a big, strong guy like Patrick Cote on top of me. I don't think that's a good idea. So, to me, Patrick Cote, he has a lot more tools to win this fight because of his size and strength, and I think chin. I think that's legitimate, because Cerrone, if you catch Cerrone early, that's when he gets finished. That's when he's most vulnerable. He seems to be a slow starter. Now, again, this is only a 3-round fight, which I think maybe negates a conditioning advantage that Cerrone would have, but that first round is going to be key, because Patrick Cote, I think, can legitimately end this fight with 1 punch, whereas Cerrone, even with his nasty kicks, I don't think that can be said. Main event of the evening, also in the welterweight division, as Rory MacDonald takes on Stephen Thompson. Huge fight in this division. The winner puts them right into the thick of things in the title picture at 170. Of course, MacDonald is coming off his loss for the title to current champion Robbie Lawler, and he has not fought since then. Thompson, since losing to Matt Brown in his second ever UFC fight, has rattled off 6 straight victories. He beat the guy in the co-main event, and Patrick Cote. Most recently, though, he defeated former welterweight champion Johnny Hendricks, knocking him out in the first round at Fight Night 82, and 7 of his 12 career victories are by knockout. Rory MacDonald also has 7 knockout victories in 18 fights. This is a 5-round fight. Conditioning-wise, I have to give the edge to Rory MacDonald. I mean, I know he got knocked out, but he went into the 5th round against Robbie Lawler. Stephen Thompson has never been past the 3rd round and has only had 2 scheduled fights, 4 or 5 rounds, and neither of those went past the 1st, knocking out Jake Ellenberger and Johnny Hendricks. So early on, the first couple rounds, Stephen Thompson's going to be at his most dangerous. If Rory MacDonald can drag this thing into championship rounds, he has a much better chance of winning this fight. Now, the only fight that Stephen Thompson has lost has been to Matt Brown. Matt Brown got in his face. He made it ugly. He didn't make it technical. He made it a brawl. And he also took Stephen down a couple of times and was able to control Stephen from that standpoint, who still is not great off his back, is really not going to threaten with submissions. However, that's completely not how Rory MacDonald fights. Rory MacDonald is a very technical guy. He's very methodical. He really studies the opponent. He studies the game. He knows where his footwork and head movement are. He really studies his opponents. He's brought in a guy like Michael Page from Bellator to try to mimic and imitate the spinning kicks and kind of more fluid karate style that Stephen Thompson has. And while Michael Page is a very excellent fighter in his own right, I don't know if there's anyone that can mimic Stephen Thompson. He is a unique fighter. And that's not to say Rory MacDonald can't be hard to mimic, but I feel like Stephen Thompson can find a lot more people that can do that methodical boxing, kickboxing style to prepare than someone vice versa. And like I said, the fact that that's the only fight Stephen Thompson lost because it was a crazy brawl and Matt Brown was on a roll then, Rory MacDonald can't do that. I think, yeah, he had a war against Robbie Lawler, but that kind of evolved into one. That wasn't start to finish. I mean, if you look at the first round of that fight, not a great round by either gentleman. And if he brings that kind of slow pace, he could get knocked out. He has to up his output. He has to be constantly in Stephen Thompson's face with kicks or a jab or something. Because if you kind of sit back and wait and you're feigning and faking, Thompson's going to figure that out. He's probably going to land another spin kick, and you're going to be knocked out. That's how he operates. You cannot sit back against Stephen Thompson. You have to bring the fight to him. You got to make him backpedal. You got to make him get off that sideways karate stance, and you got to threaten him with some takedowns and clinch as well. You can't keep the fight at range. With that said, let's get to my picks here for UFC Fight Night 89, starting with the first fight of the evening in the flyweight division for the women, Valerie Turner against Joanne Calderwood. This is a tough fight for me to pick, but I got to go Valerie Turner. I think that power she brings to the table, I think, and especially at 125, I think will be really good for her, and I think we're going to see a more refreshed Turner than we saw in her title loss to Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Olivier Aubin-Mercier against Thibault Gouti. Don't really like Thibault's chances here against Mercier. I really don't. Yeah, if he can stop the takedown, make this a stand-up fight, he has a chance, but I don't think he'll be able to do that against the French-Canadian there fighting in Ottawa. Steve Bossy against Sean O'Connell. I think Sean O'Connell does have a chance, but man, that power Bossy has, I think, is something. I think it's legitimate. I think O'Connell, even moving down a weight class, can get knocked out by this dude. And I'm going to go with Steve Bossy to win this one. Down Cerrone against Patrick Cote. Cerrone definitely has a chance to win. I think he can compete with guys here at 170. You know, being a guy that's 6 foot, even at 170, there aren't too many guys that are 6 foot and above. There aren't that many. And while he has the technical stand-up skills to win this fight, I think Patrick Cote, even at 36 years old and all the fights and all the wars he's been in, I still think has the better chin. I think he's going to be the stronger guy, and I think he's the heavier hitter. So give me the French-Canadian once again to win this one in Patrick Cote. Rory MacDonald against Stephen Thompson. Another close fight, another hard one to pick, a fight that can go either way. But like I was saying in my breakdown, I think the fact that Rory MacDonald's not that high output guy, he's more of a technical guy, kind of hit you with 1 or 2 and kind of go away. Not quite Dominic Cruz in the way he moves and can avoid shots, maybe not quite like that, but in terms of his striking, he doesn't throw wasted punches. He's not throwing punches just to throw punches, and he doesn't get in too many heated exchanges with guys. Or he tries to avoid them, I should say. So, also, first fight after that war he had with Robbie Lawler that was about a year ago, is it the same guy? You know, is he gun-shy a little bit to get hit? Now, Stephen Thompson can knock people out, but it's not from one punch. It's typically from his kicks. But if Rory MacDonald's going to sit back and wait, it's going to be all for Stephen Thompson. And I think that will be a huge factor in this fight and why I'm picking the Wonder Boy, Stephen Thompson, to win this main event. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. You can also follow me on Instagram at TheJimGraham as well. And again, I already gave a shout out to our friends at MMA Fight Club on Facebook, AJ Hiller, MMASignaturesUSA.com. Also, thank our friends there at MMAforlife.ca, MMAinsider.net as well. So, for my partners there on those websites, again, you can see the link below in the description. The aforementioned Stephen Thompson, who came on the show earlier. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.